Michael Simpson, Professor Michael Simpson, is a geneticist, and we know that genetics is important to skin, but Mike is just going to tell us a little bit about genes and how they may relate to us as patients in dermatology. So thank you very much, Michael.
Thanks. As John said, I'm a geneticist, and it's a real great pleasure to talk to you guys today. A lot of my research is very much focused on understanding the genetic basis of skin diseases, working with John on Mendelian skin diseases, so rare skin diseases. But today I'm really going to talk about the work we've been doing around common skin diseases like psoriasis, eczema, and acne. But I'm really going to try and give you a kind of conceptual overview of what genetics is and how we use that to understand disease processes, and then how we can use that in the clinic. So DNA is a long molecule made of repeating units that we call bases, and we've given these 4 bases names, and we refer to them as A, T, C's, and G's. And within our cells as humans, the DNA, if we stretch it out, is 3 billion bases long, so there's a lot of information there. And each of us have 2 copies of the genome, one that we've inherited from our mum and one that we've inherited from our dad. And they both encode similar information to make proteins, which are the building blocks of the body, including the antibodies that Sophia's just been telling us about. But what I'm really interested in is genetic variation. So that's how positions in the genome which are different between each of us. And so around every 1,000 bases within the genome, if we compare the genomes of any 2 of us in the room, there'll be differences at those every 1,000 bases. And as we inherit our genomes from our parents, what we're really inheriting is that kind of information that's the same, and then we inherit the variation, these differences in the DNA. And so many of those variants, many of those different DNA sequences are shared by some of us, maybe half of us in the room, but some of them are very rare, and they're only shared by us and our close relatives, and some of them can be completely unique and just shared by us as an individual, and that our parents don't have, so a new one rarely can arise. And so importantly, these genetic variants, it's these variant positions which influence the physical traits and why we look different from each other. But importantly, they also cause differences in our biology, how our cells are working, which leads to differences in health and disease susceptibility. And so, as I've said, some rare skin diseases that we've been working on with John, like EB, can run in families, and they're caused by rare genetic variants. But common complex skin diseases like psoriasis, acne, and eczema are influenced not by one single variant, but by many thousands of variants across the genome. And many of these are common, and they just change our risk of developing disease by a small amount. And so one way to think about these common genetic variants that influence disease risk is that there's kind of 2 versions in the population. And one version will increase your risk a little bit, and the other one is kind of protecting you. If you have that variant, it's protecting you from disease. And so what we do in our research studies is we compare to find these differences in DNA which influence disease or influence different aspects of being a human. So one way we might do this is comparing individuals with disease to individuals without disease. Or alternatively, we can just look at individuals who do have disease, but pull out the individuals who have severe disease and compare those to individuals who have mild disease. And so this is the typical output of our research studies. So every single dot on this plot is a variant position within our genome. And so that's going across chromosome 1 all the way to chromosome 22 in the X chromosome. And the kind of height of the peaks is the evidence that there's a difference between people who have disease or don't have disease. So there's a difference between these 2 groups. And so the studies that we do are huge. So our recent study of the genetic basis of acne included over 1 million participants, of which about 60,000 of them had severe acne. And we're looking at just over 10 million genetic variants spread across the genome. And so why genetic studies are important is that they can give us new ideas for disease treatment. So if we can identify the genetic differences that reduce disease risk, and we can understand the biological mechanisms that underpin that reduction in risk, then we can develop new drugs or intervention that mimic these protective effects and provide them to individuals as a drug. But we can also personalize treatment based on genetic risk. So we can identify individuals who have many of these genetic variants that cause them to have risk of disease, who might then be, as I'll show you an example shortly, who might have high risk of having severe symptoms, and personalize their medical care based on these likely future symptoms. So this is an example of how genetic discovery that was made here at Guy's around about 10 years ago that's led to the development of a new drug. So what we identified in a study, a genetic study of psoriasis, so comparing individuals who have psoriasis to individuals who don't have psoriasis, we found a genetic variant that means your version of TYK2 protein, which is this protein here, if it doesn't work correctly, you're much less likely to get psoriasis. So this led to Bristol Myers Squibb, who are a pharmaceutical company, to develop a drug that mimics the effect of this genetic variant that makes you less likely to get psoriasis. So they developed a small molecule that inhibits TYK2, and this has now been shown in clinical trials to be effective in improving symptoms of people living with psoriasis, and has now been approved and is being prescribed. And then the kind of second example I gave about predicting the course of disease. So this is our recent study, again in psoriasis, but what we showed that genetic variants that mean within the population that you're more likely to get psoriasis. If you do get psoriasis, you're also more likely to get severe disease. And this genetic risk is as informative as other risk factors that we know about. That are more likely that an individual will get severe disease, for example, BMI. But this genetic risk is currently unseen by doctors. They can't see that you're at high genetic risk, whereas they might be able to see that you have a high BMI and try and offer some advice to improve that, but they can't see the genetic risk, so they can't see that future path laid out for you. And so this information may be useful to identify individuals when they first develop symptoms of a disease who could benefit from having stronger medications earlier. And so in terms of next steps for us, we really need to understand the genetic mechanisms of disease in diverse groups of populations. So genetics studies have been incredibly good at understanding the genetic basis of disease in populations of European ancestry. We've been not so good at getting participation from a broader communities, and that's something we really need to work on. I'm keen to work with some of you in the room over coming years to improve that. And similarly, we want to not only study the genetics of disease onset, so whether people get disease or not, but more information about the disease activity, the severity of disease, how individuals differ in their response to treatment, and how their personal experiences of living with disease, and link those to genetic information, because we can do this now at the scale that we need. And importantly, in terms of using these genetic findings to start to inform drug development, we do need to understand what those genetic variants do, not just in terms of disease risk, but in terms of the biological processes that they affect. So to do this, we need blood samples and biopsies from healthy individuals, as well as individuals who are living with disease, and from healthy skin and skin where the disease process is active, to investigate these effects of genetic variants on molecules and cells. And again, very much looking forward to working with some of you over coming years to help us shape how we do this research most effectively. So I'll stop there, but thanks for listening and very happy to take questions, which I think is later.
Thank you very much, Michael.